Hello there. Today we're in Germany, a small town called Marktbreit, and it's, about half an hour from Würzburg, maybe an hour from Würzburg, depending how fast you drive on the Autobahn. A lovely little medieval town, not very big, the kind of thing you can walk around in an hour. Still got lots of original elements to it. The most kind of wonderful for me thing being this, which is the main gate, the main tour, which goes over a stream. I don't know whether the stream acted as a moat to the medieval wall. It looks as if it did, but it's just the most beautifully romantic view, this particular view. But as you can see, it's slightly difficult to find a position. There's no kind of cafe here, which will be ideal for this view, this famous view. So we're standing up today. So we've got our paper laid down on this wide wall. Careful not to knock anything over to the left where the river is. And I'm not going to jump in that river to fish out my my paintbrush if I drop it. So we've got a small area in which to lay our stuff down, but we're having to stand up. And as you can see, it's a blisteringly sunny day, very hot. Hat on, and I'm desperately aware of trying to prevent annoying shadows over the sheet, really for your benefit. The funny thing is, when you're drawing and you get this kind of moving shadow over your own head, as the drawer, you're not aware of it. Literally, I'm not thinking of it. It's often in the beginning when I first started recording, I would say, oh my God, look, I realise now there's this big shadow in this view. But when you're drawing, you're not really aware of it because you're looking at the drawing. You're in the drawing. You're not looking at the surface shadows on top of the drawing. It's quite an interesting way that the brain can kind of isolate what's important to it and, exclude the distractions. So that's a benefit. But when I am recording, of course, I suddenly think about the act of looking back at the recording. And so in this case, as I say, I'm literally, in some cases, leaning back to draw this for your benefit, to try and get my bloody head out of the way, because I've got such an enormous head, so I'm told. So anyway, we're going through this drawing using a technique I've been using in Germany recently, which is using this blue sort of washy line as a starting point. So no construction line, no pencil line, but this time I'm starting with my angled shader brush. This is a slightly finer view, I think. I'm further away from it, so I think I need to be slightly more delicate. So I'm not using the mop brush to start with. I'm using the angled shader because it has the ability to be what I would class as sharp. It produces a fine sort of definite line, but of course the benefit of the angled shader is you can turn it on its side and get, as you see here, kind of big blocky shapes like the windows, for example. So you can see how I've set up the drawing. This is a very kind of iconic view. If you go to this town and you look at a postcard rack, this is the view you get. It's kind of a very famous view of this gatehouse over the top of this little river. So that's an important sort of moment which I want to capture the whole thing. So I've started by making sure that the focal point, which is obviously the far gate, is small enough in the middle of the drawing sheet that I can get that sense of the arch below it and the reflection and the dome and the building to the right hand side, and get everything else around it to kind of frame it. Even some of the wall which I'm leaning on, will appear in this drawing by the end, so that there's a sense of its framing. So very much like it is in real life, you do see this gatehouse in this kind of long thin vista, this kind of distant vista. You can't get closer to it than I am now, in a way. So I wanted to kind of capture that feel to it. Now you'll note that the first mark I made was that tall thin tower on the very top of the main tour itself, because that for me is the sort of, the hat on top, the focal point from which everything runs. That's the, if you like, a center point, a sort of a central starting point. It would be possible to choose any point really, and I could start with the arch, for example, on the bottom and work up from there. But I think it's really useful for yourself in that kind of first minute when you're setting up. You're looking at the view ahead of you and you're thinking, what's my topic, what's my subject, where am I starting from, where's my sort of line of energy within this view. And for me, it's obviously about this tower, the center line through that gatehouse, and that arch at the bottom where the stream comes through, and everything to the sides is just framing, just decoration, just stuff at the side. But that thing in the middle has to be as I want it to be. That has to be kind of right-ish. So I've started with that, and everything else there I'm just kind of, feathering in. So the buildings, for example, on the left are a sort of representation, but they're nothing like as detailed, nothing like as kind of specific. Now I think it's worth just going back to that point of standing up when drawing. Because it actually changes how I draw. It means I spend less time on it, because I just don't want to stand for an hour looking at a view. There's my pencil case I use is made by a company called Etcher Lab, I think. Great bag, and they also do a kind of standing easel thing, like a bag you can put a strap around it and you can draw while standing up. And I looked at this thing and was horrified. The idea of standing with this strap thing around you, drawing with this piece of paper tied up to you, it just looks so uncomfortable. It looks like you're in a warehouse making notes upon how many boxes you're counting on shelves. It's that kind of thing. It's not something I would want to have as a happy sort of experience, urban sketching, while on holiday, for example. I want to be able to sit and relax. So if I'm doing a standing view, it's because the view is super important to me. It's this view, I wasn't going to leave this town without it. So that meant I was going to stand up, and that meant I was going to do this fast, meaning something within the sort of 30-minute kind of area. You can tell really by the way I've already put the sky in with the same blue. I'm kind of making much quicker decisions, because I'm giving myself the freedom to do that. I'm saying your priority here is to not bake. I don't want to kind of collapse it with sunstroke. This is a very bright, very hot day, and I'm sort of standing in this little, slightly uncomfortable position. Let's get this drawing down, but let's be proud of it. Let's not just do, sort of notes. Let's actually get a drawing out of it, but let's shortcut. And shortcut in this case means it's still going to be A3, because for me A3 is the fastest size, if that makes sense, because it means you can draw big. So by making the drawing big means you move your arm fast, instead of having a small piece of paper which you have to be tight and precise on. So I'm moving my whole arm as much as I'm moving my fingers. So that for me is a very quick and responsive way of doing a drawing. So that's the first part of being fast, is actually the size of the drawing itself. For me, the bigger the drawing size, then the quicker I can draw it in many ways. But also because I'm restricting my colour range. I'm basically blue and white. I have my watercolour set here. I can add colour if I choose to, but I'm starting from the premise that if I start feeling faint from sun after 30 minutes, I can say this drawing's done. In fact, any moment from sort of now on, I can call a halt to it and go off and get some proper shade and a nice glass of something cold, because this is supposed to be a pleasure. This is not a sort of a challenge. This is not something where I'm being marked. This is something where I'm doing it for my own satisfaction, my own pleasure. And it's not something I need to feel sort of exhausted by in the same way. I mean, when you're doing a drawing, you can feel quite kind of oof by the end of it, but it's not the same as feeling exhausted. It's like when if you go and see a play or a particularly good film, and you come out feeling a bit kind of exhausted by it, it's that kind of feeling. It's not like you're physically spent, but you've been so mentally engaged by what you've been doing, what you've been seeing, that it's kind of taken a little bit of oof out of you. Not energy, because you've still got energy, but just some of your brain is still in that drawing somehow. Now, a word about Marktbreit. There's a very famous town in this area called Rothenburg, where all the urban sketchers go. Ian Fennelly does his drawing school lesson thing down in Rothenburg. It's a beautiful place, and Marktbreit is a town which is just north of there. So it's literally kind of on the way. It's the kind of town that if you're going to Rothenburg, you kind of go through this town. And I've been to Rothenburg before. I've been to Rothenburg a couple of years ago. So in this trip, I'm not going to Rothenburg. I'm going to the other things around it that maybe, I could have done last time but didn't because, time wasn't there. And it's amazing to find all these little villages where there's almost no tourism, certainly no international tourism. There's kind of local tourism, but if you go to Rothenburg, there's kind of coach parks, and there's people who fly in specifically to see this beautifully preserved medieval town. The whole Christmas market thing in a little town. It's very the kind of thing that people expect from a small German town. Very, very pretty. But as far as I'm concerned, these towns around it are just as charming and have the benefit of you feel like you're making a bit of a discovery in the sense that it's you're there on your own, at least when you're sketching. You're not surrounded by other people doing the same thing, catching up, crossing off the list of the urban sketchers must sketch, which Rothenburg is certainly on. Now, it's true to be said that I rarely use watercolour, traditional watercolour. When I'm in my hometown, London, I don't really use watercolour. I take a bigger set of coloured acrylic paint pens, which I find is more interesting to use. And when I'm travelling and I want to be super lightweight, then I'll take a little watercolour set. Because ultimately I find it a bit, it's a bit traditional, basically. But I have to say, this little set I took, which I kind of was very careful which colours I took, very much in the kind of blues and the stony browns. And I have to admit, I really enjoyed it. It made me kind of, fall back a little bit in love with watercolour again, albeit in this very restrictive manner. I mean, the way you can do the water, for example, and the shadows is just so immediate, especially in this kind of wash, which means kind of very watered down, where the colour isn't so intense. It's not like a gouache, a solid colour. It's a very transparent colour. And there's something very alive about it. There's something very pliable and relaxed about it. And I have to say, it's, I've really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this little bit of watercolour. I would be nervous about having too many colour choices, because ultimately I feel that's one of my things at the moment. I think the more colours you choose, the more restricted you get in some ways. That doesn't make sense until you do it. There's something freeing about restricting your palette choices. Now you'll note that it wouldn't be me without some kind of paint pen, so we've used the white to kind of sharpen up this whole drawing and bring a lot of definition. It's doing a brilliant job. And now, just in the last few minutes, I'm going in there with a Posca fineliner blue just to add a little bit of focus. It's hard to see when it's at this size, but when you see the final drawing, that little bit of blue fine lining, it's like that correction you have on a lens when you focus in and it just becomes that sort of pin sharp look. It just gives certain areas sharpness, and it sort of ensures your eye is moving to that sharp point. So it's a really kind of nice way of bringing that kind of edginess and that level of definition. Now I get to this point and I think I'm down, and I suddenly realize the sky isn't quite what I wanted it to be. I was being a bit too quick with that lay down. So I've gone in with some light blue, which I've never done really, light blue on top of a sort of a darker wash, but it's quite a fun effect. It's fades in and kind of feathers in a really sort of cloudy kind of way. It's obviously in no way like the view. It isn't the colour of the sky, it isn't where the clouds are. I'm only doing it for kind of graphical reasons, to hold the drawing together, to make sure that sky pushes back but has that kind of radiance to it. And of course, because of the reflection in the water, which I'm in no way trying to represent the kind of green colour of the river, I see no reason to do that. So I'm reflecting the brightness of the sky, and that really helps to pull the drawing together, where the sky and the river are making this beautiful connection, and it feels suddenly like a completed piece of work. Now, I've checked back on the recording, and this took 37 minutes, start to finish, with a couple of pauses to breathe in and out. And I'm really happy with it. I think I've captured the moment exactly the way I wanted to do. It's unusual to be happy. I thought I'd just add this shot which shows you the camera setup. I get asked questions about the camera setup, so you can see how that kind of GoPro sort of sits on a bracket over the top of the drawing, keeping it at my eye line. And here you see the final piece. As I say, I'm happy. It's got a bit of charm. I feel like I was there, you know. There's something about drawing that puts you in the place, and this drawing, you know, even though it's only 30 minutes long, it's in my head now, and it will be in my head forever. I'll always have a little bit of Marktbreit in my head. So thank you for watching all the way to the end.